I am sitting in my empty kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at my phone screen, displaying the message that shattered what remained of my world. I am filing for divorce tomorrow. 3 years ago, this same kitchen was filled with laughter during Sunday morning pancake breakfast with my husband David and our children Emma and Jake. We were the picture-perfect American family, or so I thought. Now the silence is deafening, broken only by the hum of our refrigerator and my own regrets echoing in my head. I destroyed everything because I listened to someone I trusted completely. Before I tell you how I destroyed my perfect family, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever made a decision you wish you could take back, and subscribe for more real-life stories. Now let me take you back to where it all began to fall apart. My name is April, and at 29 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. David and I had been married for 7 wonderful years, living in our cozy 3-bedroom house in Portland, Oregon. He worked as a software engineer for a tech startup downtown, while I had a part-time marketing job that allowed me to be home when our kids got out of school. Emma was 8 years old then, a bright little girl who loved playing piano and reading chapter books way above her grade level. Jake, our 6-year-old son, was our little athlete, always kicking his soccer ball around our backyard or begging David to throw a football with him. Our life had a comfortable rhythm. David would leave for work each morning after kissing me goodbye and ruffling the kids' hair as they ate their cereal. I would drop them off at school, head to my office for 4 hours, then pick them up for afternoon snacks and homework time. Evenings were family time, dinner together at our kitchen table, board games, or watching movies curled up on our sectional couch. Weekends meant barbecues in our backyard, trips to Washington Park for picnics, or visits to Powell's Books, followed by ice cream downtown. Sure, we had the normal stresses of any married couple with young children. David sometimes worked late when his company had tight deadlines, and I occasionally felt overwhelmed juggling work and motherhood. But we always made time for each other. Date nights every few weeks, morning coffee together before the kids woke up, little surprise notes in each other's lunchboxes. I felt secure in our love, even when life got hectic. Then my sister Madison came back into our lives in a big way. Madison is 3 years older than me and had always been the more dramatic of the two of us. She lived in Los Angeles working as a real estate agent, married to a guy named Brett who owned a small construction company. They had seemed happy enough during their 5 years of marriage, at least from what I could tell during our occasional phone calls and holiday visits. But that spring, Madison called me sobbing. Brett had asked for a divorce, claiming they had grown apart and wanted different things. She was devastated, angry, and bitter. Within 2 weeks, she had packed up her Honda Civic and driven north to stay with me, just until I figure out my next move. I felt terrible for her and wanted to be a supportive sister during her difficult time. Madison looked awful when she arrived at our doorstep with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. She had lost weight, her usually perfectly styled blonde hair was in a messy ponytail, and she wore sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt that I had never seen her in before. This was a woman who normally would not step outside without full makeup and designer clothes. The divorce had clearly taken a huge toll on her. At first, I was focused on helping her heal. We spent hours talking about her marriage, what went wrong, and how she was feeling. But after a few weeks, I noticed Madison's conversations started shifting. Instead of focusing on her own healing, she began making subtle comments about my marriage to David. "David seems kind of distant lately," she said one evening as we cleaned up dinner dishes while David helped the kids with their baths upstairs. "Has he always been this quiet?" I defended him immediately. "He's just stressed about a new project at work. His team is under a lot of pressure right now." Madison replied, loading plates into our dishwasher. "It is just that Brett started acting exactly like this right before everything fell apart with us. Working late, not really engaging with conversation at home, seeming distracted all the time." I felt a small knot form in my stomach, but I pushed it away. David was nothing like Brett. Our marriage was solid, built on 7 years of love, trust, and partnership. Madison was just projecting her own failed relationship onto mine. But over the following days, I found myself paying closer attention to David's behavior. Was he more distant than usual? He had been working late 3 or 4 nights a week recently, something that used to happen only during major product launches. When he came home, he often seemed tired and distracted, giving me a quick kiss before disappearing upstairs to shower or check emails. Our conversations at dinner were mostly about the kids' activities and household logistics, not the deeper talks we used to have about our dreams, funny things that happened at work, or random thoughts about life. Madison picked up on my growing awareness. "I am not trying to cause problems," she said one afternoon as we folded laundry together. "I just care about you, and I recognize the signs. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel special and appreciated." David does make me feel special, I insisted, but even as I said it, I was trying to remember the last time he had surprised me with flowers, planned a spontaneous date night, or even complimented me on how I looked. It had been months, maybe longer. "When was the last time he really looked at you?" "April," Madison asked gently. "I mean, really saw you not just as the mother of his children or his household partner, but as a beautiful, interesting woman worth pursuing." I could not answer that question, and Madison saw it in my face. For the first time since David and I started dating in college, I felt a crack of doubt about our relationship. Maybe Madison was right. Maybe I had been so focused on being a good mom and keeping our household running smoothly that I had stopped noticing how our romantic connection had faded into comfortable routine. Madison was relentless in her subtle campaign to make me question my marriage. She never directly told me to leave David or accused him of cheating, but she planted seeds of doubt that grew larger each day. She would make observations about successful women she knew in Los Angeles, who had left unfulfilling marriages and found happiness with men who truly appreciated them. "You are incredibly talented and beautiful, April," she would say. "Any man would be lucky to have your attention. You should not settle for someone who takes you for granted." She told me elaborate stories about her ex-husband, Brett, describing a pattern of behavior that sounded eerily similar to what I was now noticing in David. According to Madison, Brett had started working late, stopped being affectionate, and seemed distracted at home. She claimed she ignored these warning signs until she discovered he was having an emotional affair with a woman from his gym. "I wish someone had told me to pay attention to my own needs," Madison said with tears in her eyes. "I spent 5 years trying to be the perfect wife while Brett slowly checked out of our marriage. I deserved better, and so do you." I began to believe that maybe I did deserve better. Maybe David's behavior was not just work stress, but a sign that he was losing interest in me as a woman. Madison encouraged me to start focusing on myself again, to remember who I was before I became Mrs. David and Emma and Jake's mom. "You need to do things that make you feel alive and attractive again," she advised. "Take care of yourself. Dress up for work. Remember what it feels like to be appreciated by someone." Right around this time, my marketing firm hired a new creative director named Tyler. He was 31 years old, recently moved to Portland from San Francisco after his own divorce. Tyler was charming and funny with dark hair and an easy smile that made everyone in our small office feel more energized. He had a way of making people feel heard and valued, something that I realized I had been missing at home. Tyler and I started working closely together on a campaign for a local restaurant chain. He would compliment my ideas in team meetings, saying things like, "April's insights about our target demographic are exactly what this campaign needs." He treated me like a creative partner, rather than just the part-time employee who handled social media posts and client communications. Our collaboration quickly extended beyond work hours. Tyler would suggest grabbing coffee to discuss campaign strategies or working through lunch to refine our presentations. He was genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions, asking follow-up questions and building on my ideas in ways that made me feel intelligent and valuable. "You have such a natural understanding of consumer psychology," Tyler told me one afternoon as we reviewed market research data. "Have you ever thought about going back to school for your MBA? Someone with your insights could run her own agency someday." No one had talked to me about my professional potential in years. David was supportive of my part-time work, but he saw it more as something that gave me personal fulfillment and extra household income rather than a career worth developing. Tyler saw ambition and talent in me that I had forgotten I possessed. Madison noticed my improved mood and encouraged it. "You are glowing lately," she observed. "It is amazing what happens when someone recognizes your worth." When Tyler and I had to work late one evening preparing for a big client presentation, something shifted between us. We were alone in the conference room, surrounded by printouts and laptops, when he looked up from his notes and said, "April, I need to tell you something. I cannot stop thinking about you." My heart started racing. This attractive, intelligent, successful man was confessing feelings for me. When was the last time David had told me he could not stop thinking about me? I could not remember. "Tyler," I said weakly, "I am married." "I know," he replied, "and I respect that. But I also see how unhappy you are. You deserve to be with someone who sees how amazing you are." Before I could respond, Tyler leaned across the table and kissed me. It was soft and gentle at first, then more passionate as I found myself kissing him back. I felt desired and beautiful in a way I'd not experienced in months, maybe years. When we finally pulled apart, I was overwhelmed with guilt, but also with a feeling I had almost forgotten existed: the thrill of being wanted by someone new. Tyler held my hands and told me he understood if this could never happen again, but he wanted me to know how he felt. I drove home that night, in a daze, my lips still tingling from Tyler's kiss. Madison took one look at me and smiled knowingly. "Something good happened today," she said. It was not a question. I told her everything, expecting her to be shocked or disapproving. Instead, Madison hugged me and said, "You are finally starting to live your life again. You deserve to feel this happy." "But I am married," I protested. "This is wrong." "What is wrong is David not appreciating the incredible woman he married," Madison replied firmly. "You are not doing anything that thousands of women in unfulfilling marriages have not done. You are remembering what it feels like to be valued and desired." Over the next 2 months, Tyler and I developed a relationship that was both intensely physical and deeply emotional. We would meet for coffee before work, text throughout the day, and find excuses to work late together. Our lunch meetings turned into drives to a small hotel outside downtown Portland, where we would spend stolen hours talking about our dreams, our disappointments, and the connection we felt with each other. Tyler told me about his divorce, how his ex-wife had criticized everything about him until he felt like a failure as a husband. With me, he said he felt like the man he was meant to be: successful, attractive, and capable of making a woman truly happy. I shared my frustrations about feeling invisible in my own home, how David seemed to see me only as a household manager rather than a desirable woman. The guilt was eating me alive, but I felt addicted to the way Tyler made me feel. He would send me texts throughout the day telling me I was beautiful, that he was counting the minutes until he could see me again, that I made him believe in love again. When was the last time David had sent me a romantic text? I honestly could not remember. I was living a complete double life. At home, I was the devoted mother, helping Emma with her piano practice and cheering Jake on at his soccer games. I cooked dinner, did laundry, and maintained the household routines that kept our family running smoothly. But part of my mind was always thinking about Tyler, replaying our conversations and physical moments together, planning when I could see him next. David began to notice changes in my behavior, though he could not pinpoint exactly what was different. I was more distracted during our conversations, quicker to get frustrated with household chaos, and less interested in our usual weekend activities. I started spending more time getting ready for work, choosing outfits more carefully, and wearing makeup daily instead of just on important meeting days. Most significantly, I had become secretive with my phone in ways that were completely unlike my normal behavior. I would take it with me to the bathroom, keep it face down during dinner, and feel anxious when David was anywhere near it. These changes were not lost on him, though he chose to give me the benefit of the doubt rather than confronting me directly. One evening in late September, David attempted to plan a romantic evening for us. He had arranged for his parents to take Emma and Jake for a sleepover, cooked my favorite salmon dinner, and opened a bottle of wine we had been saving for a special occasion. I could see he was making an effort to reconnect with me, to bridge whatever gap he sensed had grown between us. But all I could think about was Tyler. Earlier that day, he had told me he was falling in love with me and wanted to know if I felt the same way. I was distracted throughout David's carefully planned evening, checking my phone for messages and barely engaging in his attempts at conversation. "April," David said finally, reaching across our dining room table to take my hand. "Are you okay?" You seem like you are somewhere else entirely. I pulled my hand away and mumbled something about being stressed with work deadlines. I could see hurt flash across his face at my rejection of his physical affection, but I was too consumed with my own emotional turmoil to address it properly. That night, as David slept beside me, I received a long text message from Tyler describing his feelings for me and asking me to consider what we could have together if I was willing to leave my marriage. I read his words over and over, imagining a life where I felt desired and appreciated every single day. Madison continued to encourage my relationship with Tyler, framing it as a necessary step toward my personal happiness. "You are discovering who you really are again," she would say. "David has taken you for granted for so long that he does not even notice how much you have been suffering. At least Tyler sees your worth." I convinced myself that my affair was justified because David had become emotionally unavailable. In my mind, he had abandoned our marriage first by working too much and failing to prioritize our relationship. Tyler was simply giving me what my husband should have been providing all along: attention, affection, and validation. The end came suddenly and devastatingly. David had been working late frequently, which I had assumed was the work stress he claimed it was. But one evening in early October, he came home earlier than expected and decided to use our family iPad to check his email. We shared an Apple ID account for family convenience, which meant that my text messages with Tyler were automatically syncing to the device. David found months of intimate conversations, romantic messages, and explicit communications between Tyler and me. He read everything: my complaints about our marriage, my descriptions of how Tyler made me feel, and my expressions of love for another man. When I arrived home from a late work meeting that was actually dinner with Tyler, David was sitting at our kitchen table with the iPad in front of him. His face was not angry, but devastated, completely broken in a way I'd never seen before. "Who is Tyler?" he asked quietly. My entire world collapsed in that moment. The elaborate lie I had been living for 2 months was exposed completely, and I had no choice but to tell David everything. I broke down crying, admitting to the emotional and physical affair, trying to explain how lonely and invisible I had felt in our marriage. David listened to my confession with the expression of profound hurt and disappointment. When I finished talking, he was quiet for several long minutes before responding. "April," he said slowly, "I have been working late because I was planning a surprise vacation for our family. I wanted to take you and the kids to Disney World for our anniversary next month. I have been coordinating with my boss to get 2 weeks off and saving money for the trip by taking on extra projects." My heart shattered completely. David's distance and distraction had not been signs of his disinterest in our marriage, but evidence of his love for our family. He had been working extra hours to create a magical experience for me and our children, while I had been betraying him with another man. "How could you do this to our family?" David asked, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to Emma and Jake?" I had no answer that could justify my actions. I had destroyed our marriage based on assumptions and insecurities that Madison had helped cultivate, throwing away 7 years of love and partnership for a 2-month affair with a man who had simply told me what I wanted to hear. David stood up from the table and told me he would be sleeping in our guest bedroom. "I need time to think about what happens next," he said. "But April, I do not know how we come back from this." The next morning, Emma and Jake immediately sensed that something was wrong between their parents. David was distant and quiet during breakfast, while I could barely stop crying long enough to pack their school lunches. When Emma asked why Daddy was sleeping downstairs, I struggled to find age-appropriate words to explain the situation. "Mommy made a big mistake that hurt Daddy's feelings," I told her, hating myself for having to have this conversation with my 8-year-old daughter. "What kind of mistake?" Jake asked innocently, his 6-year-old mind unable to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening to our family. "A grown-up mistake," I replied weakly. "Sometimes adults do things that hurt the people they love, even when they do not mean to." Emma, who was wise beyond her years, seemed to understand that this was more serious than typical parental disagreements. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced like Uncle Tom did?" she asked with tears in her eyes. I could not answer that question because I honestly did not know. David had barely spoken to me since our conversation the night before, communicating only about logistics related to the children's schedules and immediate household needs. Over the following days, the atmosphere in our home became increasingly tense and heartbreaking. Emma started acting out at school, getting in trouble for being disrespectful to her teacher and fighting with classmates. Jake began having nightmares and asking repeatedly if mommy and daddy still loved him. Both children could feel their secure world crumbling around them, even though they did not understand exactly why. I tried to reach out to Madison for support during this crisis, but she had suddenly become unavailable. When I called her crying about David's discovery of my affair, she cut the conversation short, saying she had her own problems to deal with and could not be my therapist. The woman who had spent months encouraging me to pursue my own happiness was nowhere to be found when I needed emotional support the most. 2 weeks after David discovered my affair, he told me he had consulted with a divorce attorney and would be filing papers. He had also spoken to a family law specialist about custody arrangements, making it clear that he intended to seek primary custody of Emma and Jake. "I cannot trust you to make good decisions for our children," he said during one of our few conversations about the divorce. "You threw away our family for a workplace affair. How do I know you will not prioritize your own desires over their needs again?" His words cut deeply because they were true. I'd been so focused on my own feelings of neglect and my excitement about Tyler that I had not considered how my actions would affect Emma and Jake. I had betrayed not only my husband, but also my children, who deserved parents who put their family's stability above personal gratification. The kids' reactions to the news of our impending divorce were devastating. Emma wrote me an angry letter saying she hated me for hurting Daddy and breaking up our family. She refused to speak to me for several days, communicating only through David when necessary. Jake was younger and more confused, but he began clinging to David and seemed afraid to be alone with me, as if I might disappear or hurt him somehow. My relationship with Tyler ended abruptly once David discovered our affair. Tyler was transferred to a different department within our company, and we agreed that continuing any kind of relationship would be inappropriate and damaging for everyone involved. The man who had told me he was falling in love with me and wanted a future together suddenly became unavailable once the reality of divorce and custody battles became clear. I also lost my part-time marketing job when the situation with Tyler made the workplace environment too awkward and uncomfortable for our small team. Without that income and facing legal fees for divorce proceedings, I quickly realized that I could not afford to keep our family home on my own. Madison, meanwhile, had found a new apartment and moved out without much notice or discussion. When I confronted her about abandoning me during the worst crisis of my life, she became defensive and angry. "I told you to be careful," she said. "I never told you to blow up your entire life. You made your own choices, April. Do not blame me for the consequences." But as I reflected on the past several months, I realized that Madison had systematically encouraged every doubt and insecurity I had about my marriage. She had pushed me to see David's normal work stress as evidence of his disinterest in me. She had encouraged my relationship with Tyler from the very beginning, framing my affair as justified self-care rather than a betrayal of my family. Madison had been miserable after her divorce and could not stand to see me happy in my marriage. Instead of dealing with her own pain and working toward healing, she had chosen to destroy my happiness so that we could be miserable together. When her plan worked too well and my life fell apart completely, she abandoned me because my problems had become more dramatic than her own. 3 months after David filed for divorce, I was living alone in a small apartment across town, seeing my children only during supervised visitations twice a week. Emma and Jake were staying with David in our family home, trying to maintain some sense of stability while their parents worked through legal proceedings and custody arrangements. The supervised visitations were mandated by the court because David's attorney had argued that my affair demonstrated poor judgment that could affect my parenting decisions. I had to meet with Emma and Jake in a family services office with a social worker present, which felt sterile and artificial compared to our previous easy family dynamics. But gradually, I began to see small signs of healing. Emma slowly started talking to me again during our visits, though she remained guarded and hurt. Jake asked me directly if I was going to be a better mommy now, which broke my heart, but also gave me hope that reconciliation with my children was possible. I enrolled in intensive therapy with Dr. Patricia Williams, a family counselor who specialized in helping people rebuild relationships after infidelity and divorce. Through our sessions, I began to understand the patterns of thinking that had led me to make such destructive choices. Dr. Williams helped me recognize that I'd been seeking external validation instead of communicating with David about my needs within our marriage. Rather than telling him I felt unappreciated or disconnected, I had chosen to find those feelings of worth through an affair with Tyler. I had also allowed Madison to manipulate my insecurities because her opinions felt easier to accept than doing the hard work of improving my marriage. Healing from this is going to require you to take full responsibility for your choices, Dr. Williams explained. You cannot blame Madison for manipulating you or David for working too much. You chose to have an affair, and you need to understand why you made that choice if you want to avoid making similar mistakes in the future. I wrote heartfelt letters to both David and the children, taking complete responsibility for my actions and outlining the steps I was taking to become a better person and mother. I did not make excuses or try to justify my affair, but I did explain how sorry I was and how committed I was to earning back their trust. To David, I wrote, I know that saying sorry cannot undo the pain I caused you and our children. I destroyed 7 years of love and trust because I was selfish and weak. You deserved a wife who communicated her needs instead of seeking attention from another man. I am in therapy learning how to be the person you and Emma and Jake deserve, whether or not you ever forgive me. To Emma and Jake, I wrote age-appropriate letters acknowledging that Mommy had made terrible choices that hurt our family, but promising that I was working hard to become the mother they deserved to have. I also started working full-time at a new marketing firm, both to prove my financial stability for potential custody modifications and to rebuild my sense of professional identity. I cut off all contact with Madison, telling her clearly that I understood how she had manipulated my vulnerabilities and that I could not have a relationship with someone who had actively worked to destroy my marriage. You used my insecurities against me because you could not stand seeing me happy, I told Madison during our final phone conversation. A real sister would have encouraged me to work on my marriage, not to have an affair. After 6 months of consistent therapy, stable employment, and regular visitation with the children, David agreed to modify our custody arrangement. While we were not reconciling as a couple, he acknowledged that I was making genuine efforts to address the issues that had led to my affair. I can see that you are doing the work, he told me during one of our co-parenting conversations. Emma and Jake need their mother, and I think you are becoming someone who can be trusted with their emotional well-being again. Emma began staying overnight with me on weekends, and Jake asked if we could start having our old tradition of Sunday morning pancakes at my apartment. These small steps toward rebuilding our family relationships felt like precious gifts after months of supervised visits and strained conversations. 18 months after David filed for divorce, we were successfully co-parenting our children and maintaining respectful communication about their needs and schedules. I had learned to accept responsibility for my actions without drowning in shame, and I was building a new life focused on being the mother Emma and Jake deserved. The hardest lesson I learned was that family is not just about blood relationships. Madison was my sister, but she actively worked to destroy my happiness because she could not handle her own pain. True family members want your genuine happiness and will encourage you to fight for your relationships, not abandon them at the first sign of difficulty. I also learned that when you feel disconnected from your spouse, the answer is never to seek validation elsewhere. Marriage requires constant communication and effort from both partners. If I had told David that I felt unappreciated and disconnected, we could have worked together to strengthen our relationship instead of me destroying it through betrayal. Trust once broken takes years to rebuild, but it is possible if you are willing to do the honest work of change. My children now know they can count on me to put their needs first, and David and I have learned to co-parent effectively, even though our romantic relationship could not be repaired. Sometimes the greatest personal growth comes from the deepest mistakes, and I am finally becoming the mother Emma and Jake deserved to have all along. The path to healing required me to accept that my choices had consequences, but also to forgive myself enough to build something better from the ruins of what I had destroyed. Now, when I think about the woman I was 2 years ago, sitting in that conference room kissing Tyler while my husband worked late to plan a surprise family vacation, I feel profound sadness for all the pain I caused. But I also feel grateful for the lessons that pain taught me about love, responsibility, and the difference between people who genuinely care about your happiness and those who want you to be as miserable as they are. I want to hear from all of you in the comments below. Have you ever had someone in your life who seemed supportive but was actually undermining your happiness? How did you recognize the difference between people who truly want the best for you and those who project their own problems onto your life? Please hit that like button. If this story made you think about the relationships in your own life, and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming mistakes and rebuilding trust. Share this video with someone who might need to hear about the importance of taking responsibility for your choices and doing the hard work of change. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community where we can share our experiences without judgment. I hope my mistakes can help someone else make better choices, and I wish all of you strong, healthy relationships built on honest communication and genuine love.